Welcome back to Gaelic Games Fan TV. Clare 24 points, Kilkenny 216. Clare finally get over the line in an All-Ireland semi-final. They're back in the All-Ireland final, back in their first All-Ireland final since 2013. A huge moment for the banner, a huge moment for Clare. You could see it at full time. You saw how much it meant to the players. You saw how much it meant to the supporters as well. A huge comeback, a brilliant comeback from Clare. 5 points down at half-time, 6 points down at one stage in the second half as well after Kilkenny's second goal. Clare looked beaten. They looked finished. They looked done. The first half performance was very, very reminiscent of recent first half performances from Clare in All-Ireland semi-finals. Of course, last season, the first half performance was a little bit sluggish. They did manage to turn it around and made a bit more of a game of it. Obviously, 2 years ago, they were beating out the gates. I mean, that game was never a contest. Kilkenny just completely flattened them right from the get-go. And but this time around, they turned it around, and fair play to them. Look, they stood up when it mattered. Their big players stood up. A lot of those players were very quiet in the first half. I mean, Tony Kelly was anonymous in the first half. I had to double check to see if he was even playing at times, in all honesty, but he stood up. He hit his first point, I think, in the 48th minute. He hit two more after that as well. Shane O'Donnell was absolutely brilliant. Peter Duggan stood up. Mark Rogers stood up. David Reedy was brilliant. And of course, Aidan McCarthy, you can't flaunt him as well. He scored 11 points in total. And even some of the substitutes, Ryan Taylor, Ian Galvin, both came off the bench and made a huge, huge impact from a Clare perspective. For Kilkenny, though, they'll be absolutely kicking themselves. Absolutely kicking themselves. They could have had 3-4 goals in that first half. Look, fair play to Eibhear Quilligan. He made some brilliant saves to keep Kilkenny in it. One of them really, though, like that Mikey Carey goal chance, it was just hit straight at Eibhear Quilligan's foot. And look, fair play to Quilligan. His body positioning there was brilliant, and it was a decent save. But Mikey Carey should have scored that. He 100% should have scored that. And look, maybe it's a different game. And quite incredibly enough, the goal that Kilkenny scored from Owen Cody was the hardest goal chance. It wasn't even a goal chance. It was just made by Owen Cody through absolute brilliance. So quite remarkable. And like Kilkenny in the second half, 1-6 in total. Their final point came in the 58th minute from a TJ Reid free. It was just a very unlike Kilkenny type performance. And I think, you know, like Kilkenny obviously haven't won an All-Ireland since 2015, but the Kilkenny-ness within them, the cuteness of the Cats, as I like to call it, it's always still been there to a certain extent. Late goals, late winners, digging themselves out of holes, finding ways to win games, even when they're not playing particularly brilliant. But today, that was not the case. Like, I don't think they were better than Clare in the first half, obviously. They were by far better. They were getting a huge amount of joy in and around Clare's half-back line. Like, Owen Cody was having a field day on Adam Hogan, and obviously in the second half it was complete role reversal, and Adam Hogan was phenomenal. But Kilkenny were getting a lot of joy with that ball being scooped in there, and Clare were struggling. You know, Clare were struggling defensively. They were getting cut open, but Kilkenny didn't capitalise, and they missed a few chances as well. I mean, Mikey Carey missed another one as well. TJ missed a few. Like, they were just missing chances that they should have been scoring, and Kilkenny went 5 points up at half-time. It should have been 10, you know. It should have been 10. And in the second half as well, it was just very... I felt like it was very one-dimensional for Kilkenny. They kept hitting on top of Owen Cody. Adam Hogan started to win that battle, and that started to become more and more clear. Conor Cleary was having a great game. Conor Lean started to stand up as well. David McInerney, like, what an absolute colossal performance from him. He was absolutely outstanding from a Clare perspective. And yeah, like they struggled. Like, Adrian Mullen wasn't in the game at all. Very poor game from him. And it was just too one-dimensional from Kilkenny, and it was too easy for Clare. They were just gobbling that ball up time and time again. And for Kilkenny, it felt like any time they had the ball, they were either hitting it long or they were just shooting. You know, they were shooting on sight, and some of the chances were too far out. Like, TJ hit one free, which was too far out. He had another one which he probably should have scored that he missed. And look, TJ was brilliant, by the way. Like, you can't actually criticise him. Like, he scored 7 points. I do think he was Kilkenny's best player, actually, in fairness, alongside Billy Ryan. But yeah, it was too one-dimensional. They needed to mix it up. Like, they needed to try and work scores a bit more, play the ball around, try and run it through the middle. There was obviously a big breeze there as well, and I think that did influence, obviously, the first half, and Clare struggling, and obviously Kilkenny struggling in the second half. Like, Clare hit 8 points in the first half, and then obviously Kilkenny hit 1-6. So obviously there was a strong breeze there, in fairness, and that did very much influence the game. But Kilkenny needed to mix it up. They needed to try something different, and it didn't work. The players who came off the bench, like I think Tom Field and Conor Fogarty, did they come on too late in the game? They probably should have came on sooner. Walter Walsh made a bit of an impact but didn't score. And Kilkenny struggled. And like even the goal probably came against the run of play in the second half, really. And it was, it wasn't through any bit of brilliance, really, from Kilkenny. It was a mistake, obviously, by Eibhear Quilligan. And then Billy Ryan was sharpest to it and put the ball on the back of the net. But look, fair play to Clare. They stood up. They put the pressure on. They put the brakes on. And Kilkenny fell apart, really. And it's very unlike Kilkenny to see that. But at the end of the day, like, this isn't the same Kilkenny that were winning All-Irelands and everything else. Like, they do still have a few All-Ireland winners in the team. For how long? Like, will TJ Reid stick it around and go again next year? That's hard to know. Will Conor Fogarty stick around and give it another go? Will Walter Walsh do the same? It's very, very hard to know. So I think for Kilkenny, there will be massive questions asked with how they fell apart in a game that I feel like was there for them to win. Like, Clare stood up brilliantly in the second half, and they were brilliant, and you can't take that away from them. But I think Kilkenny made it much easier for Clare by consistently giving the ball away, missing chances, and just completely losing their composure. And it looked like they were hanging on towards the end, and it looked like there was only really going to be one winner. Like, ultimately, I do think the best two teams are tomorrow. I think Limerick and Cork are the two best teams in the country, and I think the All-Ireland winner will come from that game. Like, I don't think this was a great game. Overall, the first half was a little bit poor. Second half, it burst into life towards the end. But yeah, overall, there was a huge amount of flatness about this game. And we'll run through the comments here. Gavin says pretty flat first half. Football scoreline. Clare were poor, but Kilkenny didn't put them away. But the second half, it just came to life. Never expected Clare to close that gap up. Fair play to them. Do you know what, though? Like, the gap was never that big, though. Like, I think did the gap get to 6 or 7? Like, that's not that big of a lead, really, in hurling. Do you know what I mean? It's a big enough gap, obviously, in football when you've, got blanket defences and everything else sort of going left, right, and centre. In hurling, it's not really that big of a gap. We saw Limerick, come back from 10, 12 points down in the past before. Like, they themselves, I think, were 6, 7 down against Kilkenny last year. So it's not that big of a gap, but like, fair play to them. Like, they didn't lose themselves. It would have been very easy to lose confidence and everything else. And they just gradually came back into the game. And fair play to them. They stood up, first All-Ireland final since 2013. Will they win it? Look, obviously that question and everything, look, that will be discussed in due course. But Clare fans do deserve to enjoy this victory and this win. And Beast says here, what a win from the lads. I was nearly the last All-Ireland. There you go. Yeah, I mean, it's a long time coming, 2013. And Clare have had a lot of near misses, a lot of heartbreak, obviously, since then. Can they do it? Can they go and win the final? It's going to be hard. It's going to be interesting to see. Denise says, delight for Clare. This is what hurling needed. I called it all week. That will be a Clare versus Cork final. And Denise says, and Hogan v Cody, a battle for the ages. Do you know what? I think it's better that it will be either Limerick Clare or Clare Cork. I think, having the same All-Ireland final 3 years in a row would have been a little bit underwhelming. If Kilkenny had have got over the line in this game, they would have limped over the line, really. Do you know what I mean? Because the second half was really poor from them. And I think Limerick would have beaten Kilkenny fairly handily, in my opinion. We know Clare can up their levels. We know they can up their gears. The big thing with Clare, though, is just the mentality, really, because like, if Clare play like that against Limerick, they'll get absolutely swept aside in the first half. There's no doubt about it. So they'll need to be on it. But look, they've gotten over the voodoo a little bit. Like, there'll be some pressure on them in the final, but depending on who they're playing, like, majority of the pressure will probably be on Limerick, if it is Limerick who beat Cork tomorrow. Do you know that way? Because they're going for the 5 in a row. But there we go. Shane says, I'm hoping for a repeat of the 2013 final, Clare versus Cork, and hopefully it'll be a similar game or two, because both the 2013 games are classics. Yeah, there were two absolutely cracking All-Ireland finals. And yeah, it would be, it would be some storyline as well. Like, a lot of talk that this could be Shane O'Donnell's last year. Could it be Patrick Horgan's last year as well? They run it back 11 years later. It would be absolutely brilliant to see if that happened. But look, you can't write Limerick off. They're going to be there. They'll, I'm sure, have been watching this game and everything else. And or they will watch the game back if they win tomorrow. So, but there we go. But yeah, it was, like as Gavin said earlier, it was a fairly flat game. The atmosphere wasn't particularly great, by having a look at it. 39,000 at the game as well, which is very low for an All-Ireland semi-final. The atmosphere came alive in the second half when Clare came back into it. Looked like there was a majority of Clare fans in the ground. Again, I don't know what it is with Kilkenny. Like, I was at the Kilkenny-Dublin game, and there was barely any Kilkenny fans there. And from looking at it on the TV, there looked like there was sections of Kilkenny fans on the hill, but there looked like there was very, very few there. And whether it's they just don't buy into this team, maybe they saw a result like this coming. I don't really know what it is, but the atmosphere did look very, very flat. And in comparison to what it's going to be tomorrow, like tomorrow is going to be 82,000. There's going to be more than double at the game tomorrow than there was today. So, a little bit unusual there, but whether it's, cost of living, the prices of tickets or whatever, the travel, I don't really know, but yeah, it was a fairly flat atmosphere. In fairness, Shane says, I expect Limerick to win tomorrow, but I think Cork will put it up to them. I think they will. And I think it's going to be an absolutely cracking game. Can't wait for it. It's going to be huge. It's going to be absolutely huge. And, especially after how that game obviously was when they played each other a couple of weeks ago. And obviously a potential final, like if it is Cork-Clare, you get a repeat of 2013 and the classics that went there. And if it's Limerick-Clare, Limerick-Clare, massive rivals. I know Limerick have beaten Clare twice already this year, so maybe some would say Limerick should get over the line again. But Limerick-Clare, massive rivals, 5 in a row. There's so much on the line there. And look, how many times have we saw 5 in a row spoiled? Like we saw them spoiled. I know Dublin got over the line against Kerry, but only just. You think of Tipperary when they beat Kilkenny as well. So look, sometimes crazy things happen when 5 in a row is on the line. And it could happen again. And Limerick-Clare in an All-Ireland final would be incredible. And Clare and Cork in an All-Ireland final would be incredible. So, and look, I'm sure Kilkenny fans will disagree. They'll want to obviously right the wrong against Limerick. But just looking at Kilkenny there towards the end, the way they faded, the way they fell apart, it was very reminiscent of the All-Ireland final last year, where they had a lead against Limerick and then Limerick just came roaring back and sort of overpowered them towards the end of the game. This was sort of very similar. And yeah, you would sort of wonder where Kilkenny go from here, in all honesty, in terms of their key players, and TJ Reid, Conor Fogarty, Walter Walsh. Do they step away? Younger lads, there does seem to be younger players coming through. There's no doubt about that. Like Billy Drennan didn't really get a look in at times this year. He's obviously had a few injury issues. There's a few younger lads who can come into the team. Adrian Mullen has, to be fair, had massive injury issues. He was brilliant against Dublin, struggled today, but with a full year of fitness behind him, I'm sure he'll be a lot better, obviously, going into next season. But it just looks like Kilkenny are falling further away when it looked for a few years there like they were bridging the gap. You could probably have said in the last couple of years that Kilkenny were second to Limerick, whereas now they're probably the 4th best team in the country, if we're being honest. That way? So there we have it. Shawnee says, delight for Clare. Hurling is such a better watch than football these days. It is. But the first half was disappointing. Like, there's no getting away from that. Clare were very poor. Kilkenny were better, but they didn't punish Clare enough, and they didn't take enough of their chances, and they didn't play their best stuff, really. But the second half was very, very exciting. It was entertaining. I think the thing with hurling as well is that you never, like, even if the league goes to 6, 7, or 8, you never really feel like the game is done. It only really ever feels like the game is done when it gets to like 10 or 15 points. Whereas in football, if the lead gets to 6 or 7, it's because the other team will just park the bus and get every man behind the ball and everything else. It becomes harder to watch. But yeah, like it was very entertaining in the second half. Clare really stood up. David McInerney was outstanding. Ryan Taylor, who came off the bench, was brilliant. Shane O'Donnell, even though he only scored 1 point, was very, very good as well. And to be fair, he was the one man in the first half. Like when Tony Kelly was really quiet, when Mark Rogers was very quiet, Peter Duggan was quiet, Shane O'Donnell was trying. He was trying to get opportunities. He was trying to get chances. it just wasn't quite happening for him. And in the second half, it did happen for him. And obviously, he was able to set up a lot more lads for scores and everything else. And shout out to David Fitzgerald as well, who was absolutely brilliant. Man of the match, I think on RT they gave it to David McInerney. Probably would agree. He was absolutely outstanding. Look, you could look at Ryan Taylor coming off the bench, Shane O'Donnell as well, Aidan McCarthy, to be fair. Like those frees just by the sideline, like those ones were a little bit tricky. We saw TJ miss one or two of them towards the end of the game. So that they're not easy to score, especially in the moment with the pressure on the line and everything else. So no, fair play to him for standing up there. But yeah, let me know your man of the match, your thoughts on the game. We'll be back tomorrow after the Cork versus Limerick game, which I'm very, very much excited for. Poses to be game of the year, possibly more, and hopefully it lives up to the hype, because there's nothing like an L game we're all expecting that doesn't live up to the hype. But hopefully it does. And to be fair, Cork and Limerick usually does live up to the hype, in fairness. So very, very much looking forward to that. Congratulations to Clare, first All-Ireland final since 2013, and commiserations to Kilkenny. I'm sure they will be back, but it is, it's 10 years next year, 10 years next summer without an All-Ireland, should they not do it next year. So it's, it's quite incredible, really, that Kilkenny, who dominated for much of many people's lifetimes, the era is very much over now. There's no doubt about that, and it's been over for a while, but they can't quite seem to get back to where they feel they belong. But yeah, any Clare fans, Kilkenny fans, let me know your thoughts on the game. Hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll speak to you all again.